So now that we have all of our general shadows laid out, our foundation shadows, now it's going to be time to really finish this thing off and to achieve a full range of value. So right now when you're looking at the piece, all the shadows are kind of one value. It's all sort of a darkish gray. So now we're going to observe our shadows within our shadows. Remember your 6 divisions of light and shadow. You saw we have core of shadow, the areas within shadows where things get darker. We also have areas of reflected light, which again, we'll be able to observe here as well. But you can see that I'm really starting to build out, and I'm starting to build my shadows within my shadows by layering additional applications of the charcoal. You can see that I'm using the sharp point of my pencil to make sure that some of my edges stay crisp, especially on that left side of my ear. And I'm adding some more layers of charcoal to really beef up that inner ear structure. So again, we're building these things up because if you make a mistake, it's a lot easier to erase a lighter patch of charcoal as opposed to a super dark application. So again, if you're having trouble, I suggest breaking up the ear into different quadrants, or you can do like what I'm doing here, and I'm starting at the top and I'm working my way down and around the ear. Because remember, you want to focus on achieving a cohesive whole when it comes to your level of finish. You don't want to focus only on one little part of your object to finish, right? You want to make sure you finish the entire thing. So it's a good idea to kind of bounce around, to move around your object, and to kind of lay things out as you observe them. You can see that I've started to lay out my lighter ends of value, right? Those lighter pressure with my charcoal. I'm not pressing very hard to get some of these lighter values in there. Because remember, when it comes to your value scale, the white of the paper is going to be very, very bright. Those are going to serve as your highlights. So when it comes to all of your darker points, you're going to want to make sure to add in some very, very light applications of value. You can see that I'm starting to blend because, of course, when we observe our object, it's very smooth, right? That ear plaster cast is very smooth. I am using a Q-tip because I need to get some finer areas than what my finger can cover. Use a tool that works best for you. If you want to use your finger, that's totally fine, but I find that I get a little bit more control with my Q-tip, at least in this case, based on how big I drew. So again, use the blending tool that works good for you. We are moving the pigment around. And of course, this is going to help us to achieve, again, those softer values, because of course you need to observe the surface qualities of your objects and how the light acts upon them. You can see now that I'm going to be working on my cast shadows, and you can see that we are observing the edge quality of these shadows as well. Not every shadow is a nice hard outline, depending on how diffuse the light is, how far away you are from your light source. Sometimes your shadows are going to have blurry edges. Now I'm using my eraser to pull back. If you got too dark, or maybe you just want to make those highlights even more crisp, pull back those layers of charcoal with your eraser. You can use the eraser that works best for you. I'm using my hard eraser right now, but if you want to use your kneaded eraser to really get some fine areas of erasure, you can definitely do that as well. So again, if you get too dark, or if you want to pull back to lighter, pull back with your eraser, as you can see that I've done here, especially on that lobe area that got a bit too dark. Now you can see that, again, I'm going to go through and I'm really going to strengthen a lot of these edges, because you can see with the middle of our ear, we do have some very crisp edges. So I'm going to use my charcoal pencil and just provide a nice little contour around there. You'll be able to see in just a second when I move my hand. So of course, make sure that you are observing where things get truly dark and that you're allowing yourself to build up towards that. And you can see here the difference between kind of the blended charcoal, which gets a little bit softer, and the unblended charcoal that we press harder, that gets to that nice rich black. So again, we're strengthening our value scale. We're capturing nuance at this point in our process. So again, allow yourself to build up, give yourself the time and the space to be able to achieve these things. And of course, blending as we go. Like we said, keep looking back at your actual object. I am doing that, even though you can't see it. Again, it's very tempting for a lot of people to kind of eyeball it and say, okay, well, I know about where that's located, or I know about how dark that is, but always, always, always draw based on what you actually see in front of you, right? And that extends to shadows as well. So now that we've reasonably got a lot of our core shadows in here. Again, check your 6 divisions of light and shadow. You can see here that I need to refine my areas of general light that are on the base, that little rectangular base of my ear cast. And you can see that since it's such a light value, I'm just sort of blending some of the charcoal that I had on my finger and just kind of placing that pigment and pushing it around. And now I'm going to refine my edges. So again, as we've mentioned earlier, I have left the background to the final step. That is something that I suggest for you guys if you're finding that you're making a mess or if you're concerned about making a mess, especially because we do have such a clean, smooth surface, this plaster cast of the ear. A lot of the realism is going to lie on preserving that quality. So we want to make sure that we keep things nice and clean. So again, I'm just adding some little subtle details to my base. I'm going to make that little wire up at the top because remember, if you see it, you must draw it, including our little details. That's why it's important to allow yourself plenty of time for these particular steps. So when you're ready for the background, again, if you wanted to use your vine charcoal or your compressed charcoal for this step, you're more than welcome to do so. Remember that the vine charcoal will only get to a deep, rich gray. It won't get truly black, which can be good. But of course, if you want a rich, super dark black, you can either do what I'm doing right here and layer charcoal pencil, do a couple different layers in a couple different directions and then blend it, or you can use your compressed charcoal. So remember, compressed charcoal is very, very dark, and it is very hard to erase. So only use it to where you know you want it. I'm just using my charcoal pencil just to show you that it is possible to achieve a full range of value using just a single type of tool. But of course, it's good to vary things up because the vine charcoal and the compressed charcoal, they're going to come in sticks, and you'll be able to turn it on its side and get some thicker movements, so you won't have as thin of lines as I have, and you won't take as long to color in. But of course, if you see it, you must draw it, so our background is going to need to be nice and deep and dark, and that's going to provide even more contrast for our actual ear. It's really going to draw that eye in to those layers of light that we've created. So again, you're noticing that I am rotating my sketchbook. This is a helpful technique to rotate the piece of paper that you're drawing on to be able to take advantage of your wrist movements, right? You can see here that I'm also not resting my wrist on the other parts of my drawing because that will smudge it, unless of course you've applied fixative. If you're noticing a lot of smudging as you're going along, you can apply the workable fixative while you're working on your drawing because it is workable so that you can work on top of it. But of course, keep in mind that until you seal your drawing for real, things are apt to move around. So make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you're smudging all of your hard work that you've done. You can see I'm very careful and I'm not putting my wrist on my ear or near my ear. I'm making sure that that area stays nice and untouched. So I'm almost done here. Here we go. There we are. So of course you can see that we do see the paper through the charcoal, right? But of course we do need to blend this thing to get it nice and smooth. So I'm just touching up, kind of filling in some of those holes, making it so I have plenty of charcoal on the page to be able to blend and move around, right? Make sure that you allow time for the step so that you have a nice polished piece, not only with object, but with background as well. So of course, I am going to be using a rag this time. If I were to use that Q-tip, that would take a very long time. So use the size of tool that corresponds to the area that you need to cover. So I'm just using my little rag wrapped around my finger, and I'm just pushing some of that pigment around to really finish this thing off. So remember, check your 6 divisions of light and shadow, check all your little details, all your little backgrounds, and you'll be good to go for this particular exercise. Make sure to apply fixative so that things stay where they are, especially those really fine details and those fine shadows. And then we'll be moving on to our next exercise.